Hey guys, I'm back to do another comic book review, and this time I want to review a trade paperback I picked up at my local library. It is The Death of Superman. I got a little confused because it was backwards, but yeah, this is right side up. The Death of Superman. Copyright 1992. Written mostly in part by Dan Jurgens, most famous writer of this one. Many other writers took part: Jerry Ordway, Louise Simonson, Roger Stern. You should recognize that name. Roger Stern has done quite a bit of work for Marvel. He did Spider-Man, Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut, and also the Return one. Something Can Stop the Juggernaut. He did those two stories for Spider-Man. Okay, so yeah, but mostly Dan Jurgens writing this. Superman, Death of Superman. All right, major story behind it. Yeah, Warner Brothers owned DC Comics. Not DC, it's District Comics, also known as DC. Warner Brothers owned them, and Warner Brothers wanted to capitalize on Superman. The Superman movies had failed by that point. Yeah, we're talking about, where are we? Like early '92 at this point, and Warner Brothers, the executives get the idea. They want to make a TV show out of Superman. So, they had the old Superman shows back in, like black and white era of television. And, they wanted to revive that, sort of, but put a new spin on it. So this time it's kind of going to be a soap opera romance. So they got the idea for Lois and Clark, the TV show. Alright, so the big thing with that is they wanted to focus on the relationship between Lois Lane and Clark Kent. Sorry about that. Okay, so they wanted to focus on that relationship. So, it was basically going to be a soap opera romance, which, eventually would lead to a marriage between the two. But the problem with that was that the writers and the editors for DC were also planning to do a storyline where Clark Kent marries Lois Lane. But, their storyline would have taken precedent. It would have happened before the Lois and Clark marriage. So Warner Brothers wanted to have the two events coincide. They wanted the two events to happen at the same time. Both in the comics and on the TV show, they wanted to have the marriage of Superman. Okay? So that means all the planning that DC had done for, this epic crossover storyline event, where Superman would marry Lois Lane, all that planning had to be put on hold. And you go, okay, we still need to have a major storyline at this point, but we can't do the wedding of Superman. We can't do that yet. So they were desperate to come up with something else. Alright, so the running gag during the planning, the meetings, was that, we don't know what to do with Superman, let's just kill him. Let's just kill the guy. And, that was a joke, but, it kept coming up over and over. And then one of the editors, or maybe the editor-in-chief, said, you know what, that's interesting. The whole world is a lot less interested in Superman right now. Let's show them how important Superman is. Let's show them what the world would be like without Superman. So, yeah, that was the green light to go ahead and make the story The Death of Superman, kill off Superman, have a major dramatic story that would affect, mainstream media. So here we go, Death of Superman. Let's take a look at this. We're talking about, let's see here. Wow, it stops numbering the pages. I can't even tell you how many pages because it stops numbering them. Basically 167 pages without the covers. Yeah, that's a decent size for a graphic novel. This is just the death of Superman, which will be followed up by a trade paperback called The Return of Superman, which happened. With The Return of Superman collects several different story arcs that happen immediately following Superman. But I'm not here to talk about that right now. I'm just going to talk about the death of Superman, which they also made into a video game. I gotta play that game, by the way. I have never played that, but I'm very interested in playing it. Alright, but for some reason I think it was only released on Super Nintendo. I didn't get a Sega Genesis version of that. Interesting side note, as a boy, I only had a Sega Genesis for a very long time, until, I think, 96, I finally got a Super Nintendo, but by that point, you know, the game was old, so I never got a chance to play Death of Superman, but I am going to go back and play it. Looking forward to that. Okay, so, the Death of Superman. Another thing I want to say before I get into the plot and reviewing it. They took this story and adapted it into a home video DVD release animated feature. I think it's like 60 minutes, it might be 90 minutes. They call it Superman Doomsday. It's a pretty good title, but it's basically the same thing, Death of Superman, retold, but drastically different than the comic. The only part that's really the same as the comic deals with the return of Superman's storyline, which is not in this. Okay, so that DVD release, theatrical movie, not theatrical movie, but feature-length film, also deals not only with the death of Superman, but the return of Superman. So that in itself is a big difference. But okay, a lot of the characters that show up in this are not even referenced in that. Like, for instance, the JLA, Justice League of America. They have a pretty big role in the beginning of this story, and they're not even mentioned in the movie. So, there you have it. Major details. Also, the origin of Doomsday, completely different in this rather than the movie. The movie came way, way later. This was obviously the original story. Why they decided to make drastic changes, I'm not sure, but I think people will prefer this version. I prefer this version. You know, the original is usually better, but anyway, that's beside the point. Let's get into this story. Starts off really slow. This is how it breaks down. The first part was featured in the comic book Superman, Man of Steel, number 18. Sometime 92, not exactly sure. Followed by Doomsday, Justice League of America. That's the next comic book that features this story. Immediately following Superman, Man of Steel, which is part 1. Part 2, Justice League of America, Doomsday. Part 3 is Superman, Doomsday. And part 4 is The Adventures of Superman, number 497. And part 5, Superman Action Comics, what was that? Number 684. Part 6, Superman Back to Man of Steel again, number 19. And finally, Superman Volume 2, number 75 is part is it? 7. Part 7. 7 parts. So if you were to collect this, it would be 7 different comic books. As you can see here, 7 different comic books, plus everything that follows. I'm not sure how many comic books that would be, but you know, this was a very high-profile storyline, so you would think that the comic books would be worth more money, but they're not worth very much. You can get them pretty much anywhere on eBay for relatively cheap, relatively what they went for to begin with, like, you know, $4. So yeah, I mean, really, they should be worth a ton more, but because of conveniences like eBay, prices are being driven down. Unfortunately, comic book collectors are suffering. Yeah, alright. But for the history the historical significance, this story should be worth so much more. Anyways, let's talk about the quality of the plot, the quality of the writing here. I'm not impressed at all. Kind of disappointed. Even though it's so old, like 1993, you shouldn't expect too much. There were good stories from farther back then, as far as writing is concerned, and comic books. So there's not much of an excuse. The story is way too simplified. Basically, it's just Doomsday is this giant monster that comes out of the ground. Excuse me. We don't know who he is or what he is exactly, but he's going on a killing spree. Justice League of America shows up and tries to stop him. They get annihilated. Superman shows up to try and help them and save other people, and Superman starts getting his butt kicked like worse than ever before, and he's never been up against anything that's strong in his life. So Superman has to really kick it up a notch. Alright, from there, it's pretty much all action, all fighting. Just one big fight scene after another. Nothing fancy, just brawling. Fisticuffs the whole way through. This is a really testosterone-driven, ballsy story. If you like fighting in comic books, then this is right up your alley. It's just toe-to-toe, blow for blow, Superman versus Doomsday. Doomsday is a beast. Superman, his powers of X-ray vision, faster than a speeding bullet. It will leap tall buildings in a single bound. Heat vision, all of that stuff. None of it really matters. None of it, except super strength. That's the only thing. The only thing that he is able to use against Doomsday. Yeah, he tries to use his heat vision, but absolutely no effect there. So what else do I have to say about the story? Supporting characters are all there, pretty much. Lois Lane, she's the major one. Jimmy Olsen, Clark Kent's parents, they're in it briefly. They don't have very much significance. There are some other characters that are kind of unique to this story, but they don't do too much. They don't do much at all. It's pretty much just a bunch of a media frenzy trying to cover this disaster, this catastrophe, and it's such a huge scale, disaster. People are saying the end of the world. Doomsday, he's completely unstoppable, completely unreasonable. He has no logic. He's just a being of total hatred. And that's exactly what the writers intended when they made Doomsday. They just wanted this monster that they wouldn't have to go into detail of explaining his motivation or his powers. They just wanted to be okay, there's no excuse here. There's no, he's going to kill Superman, and there's not going to be an excuse for it. So they wanted to get that out of the way. They just wanted to focus on the significance of Superman. One more Superman story. Superman giving it all he's got, going above and beyond, fighting like we'd never seen him fight before, and sacrificing his life to save everyone, especially the people he loves. He dies heroically, tragically, and Lois Lane's arms, she's crying, people are crying and scared. Towards the end it gets really emotional. Very dramatic pages here. It goes into every single panel. It's not even panels anymore, it's just full page, splash page. Every page is either double page spread or full single page, and the artwork really shines. Gorgeous colors, good detail. Some of the facial expressions though, I don't know, but lots of blood and bruises on Superman. a little inconsistent with drawing Superman. In some scenes he looks kind of thin, and some scenes really bulky. Doomsday looks really cool. Let's say brutal, but you know, for 1993, it's pretty violent, but it's not like anything you have to steer kids away from completely. You know, Superman is pretty bloody, but he's not like, you know, completely torn apart. It's more like internal damage. But yeah, love the artwork. Just the way it gets better as it goes. The artwork gets much better towards the end. The destruction is just totally epic, unbelievable. In one way, it would make for a very good movie adaptation because it's so large scale and you know, visually very appealing. But there's not enough story. There's not enough going on to really make it an interesting movie. It would pretty much just be a montage of fight scenes, and that doesn't work for a movie. Other than the emotion and the drama towards the end, which would be great for a movie, other than that, it would be terrible as an adaptation. Well, a lot would have to be added to it. In other words, it doesn't translate easily. Someone would really have to add quite a bit to it, which is probably what they did for the animated feature. But as a comic book, it's great because it's exactly what you want to see in a comic book. Well, usually. You know, comic book fans are usually male, red-blooded American males. We want to see violence. We want to see heroism. And that's what this is, man. This is a fight. Total apocalypse, anarchy, destruction, mayhem. Look at this. There's even like a little sort of homage to Hulk Hogan here. See this wrestler that Doomsday watches on television? He's got the Hulk Hogan mustache going on, long blonde hair, big bulky body. Tell me that's not a Hulk Hogan reference right there. You know, the only other wrestler at that time would have been maybe, you know, not even at that time, but the only other wrestler to have a mustache like that would be, you know, Jesse Ventura. And this is clearly not Jesse Ventura. Looks a lot more like Hulk Hogan. But anyway, no lawsuits or anything. Really some great artwork. I'm going to show you a couple panels I like in particular. This one where Superman looks a little beat up. There. What else we got? Doomsday going crazy. You start to see him more and more. There we go. Okay. Yeah, his costume just sort of rips apart more and more, and we get to see what Doomsday looks like. That was pretty cool. Because he is a hideous freak. Really weird creature. This panel's great of Doomsday. Not so much Superman, but Doomsday looks cool. Alright, what else? Oh, there's a good Superman one. Towards the end, the artwork really shines. Brutal fight. Like, you know, how much more intense than that can you get? Epic. For me, for my generation, this is one of the most classic Superman stories that there is. And here's my favorite panel of the whole entire book. This is just the coolest Superman illustration I've ever seen, pretty much. Yeah, tell me that's not awesome. This is a good panel too. Superman and Lois Lane. And then, of course, his death. Right up till the bitter end. There he is, torn apart. And the final panel. Well, not the final, but the one everybody remembers the most. That's the money shot right there, the seller, that panel. And then this is the very final 2 pages. So that's the death of Superman. Like I said, very shocking for the time. You know, as soon as it was promoted, audience were obviously like, you know, what do you mean the death of Superman? Superman can't die. That's impossible. Nothing can kill Superman. Well, we soon found out that that's not exactly true. Even though he did return about a year later, we had no real indication that he was ever going to return. So, you know, this was before he got married to Lois, you know, the love of his life. He wasn't able to marry her before his death. So, very tragic. Maybe even Shakespeare-esque. So, okay, oh yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the story. The whole time Superman is fighting Doomsday, he starts, well, not the whole time, but he starts realizing the more I attack him, the more I get aggressive against this guy, the more, it seems like the stronger he gets, the more aggressive he becomes. So my whole logic was like, okay, Superman, so why don't you just take a time out, step back, and try to figure out an alternative method to fighting this guy. You know, go ask someone out in the universe, like, he's got to know somebody, have a contact, where he could get more information about Doomsday, possibly figure out a weakness, you know, what's his origin, how was he created, maybe we can reverse engineer him. But that never happens. Superman does question where he came from, and other people do too, but we don't really get a solid answer, and we're told that the answer is not important. And that's kind of true, and I can let that slide, but for Superman not to really come up with another tactic of fighting him, I just think that's bad taste. I think that's kind of like, you know, a plot hole there. Why would Superman be so stubborn? And the only thing I can come up with is maybe that if Superman did what I said and just took a break from fighting him and tried to come up with a strategy, then Doomsday would just, you know, take that time and kill everybody. So Superman really didn't have a chance. He tried to stall Doomsday by doing several different things, like burying him underwater, but none of that worked. Doomsday was just a total wrecking machine, and Superman was very concerned about the lives of people. So the whole time he's fighting Doomsday, he's also trying to save people, and you know, that just leads to him getting more and more tired. Oh yeah, here's another one of my favorite panels. Awesome. Looks like the death of Blue Beetle almost. Yeah, the JLA just totally get annihilated. I mean, they're not even in his league with all of them combined. Not even Maxima here. She's really, you know, physically strong, almost probably equal or stronger than Wonder Woman. Speaking of Wonder Woman, where is she? She's not in this issue. She's not in any of these issues. What's going on with Wonder Woman? I don't know. Oh, I was surprised to see. Okay, the son of Lex Luthor and Supergirl show up in this. But this is even more of a surprise to me and a shock. You know, I thought Supergirl was dead after Crisis on Infinite Earths. I thought she was dead, and you know she did die. But there's Supergirl here, and I don't know who she is, but she tries to help Superman by fighting Doomsday, and she gets hit by Doomsday, and her face just comes off. It's like comes off like silly putty or mud. It just like smears off, and she falls to the ground, and it shows that, oh, it was an alien. It's not really Supergirl, or this person that was pretending to be Supergirl was really an alien covered up in a bunch of makeup. So I thought that was really weird. If somebody could explain that to me. Anyway, yeah, so there you have it, man. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to give this a final rating of, let's see here. Man. It's hard because it's so epic and good in so many ways, like the artwork and just the fact that it's the death of Superman. But in other ways, like the story, not so good. So I'm going to give it a 7.5. 7.5. Alright. Well, anyway, thank you for watching my video and my review of Superman, Death of Superman. See you guys next time.